We're now live on YouTube.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of Broadland District Council on the 8th of December. And first item on the agenda is to receive any declarations of interest. Okay, so there's...
I believe we have Councillor Copplestone.
Sorry.
Thank you, James. My business has been in receipt of a local restrictions support grant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Anything for anybody else? No? Okay, so apologies for absence. I believe we're all here, so won't be any apologies, will there, James?
There's no apologies, Joe.
No. Okay, so the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of November. Starting at page 6, so I'll take those on block. Is there anything in there for anyone that needs changing, updating, amending? No? Okay, so I'll take those as approved and I'll sign those off. Thank you, everybody. Moving to matters arising within those minutes. Anything for anybody? It's quiet tonight. No. Okay. Moving on to public speaking. I don't believe there's any public speaking. Is there, James?
There's no public speaking, Chairman.
Thank you. We've got a few non-cabinet members present, so welcome to you. If at some point there's something you want to talk about or join in on, then please indicate to myself by raising your hand either virtually or in the participants list, and I'll see if I can bring you in at the appropriate time. As far as overview and scrutiny, good evening, Steve. Good to see you. Over to you.
Good evening, Sean. Yes, there's two references from ONS. One is from the 17th return in terms of the reference back, excuse me, on the member ward scheme to do with the underspend. And then the only other point I'd like to raise when you get there, Chair, is on the amendments which ONS are recommending on the budget, second wave council funding and 50,000 IT budget being set aside for the chamber, Chair. They're just those two items when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I'll do my best to remember to bring you in on that item. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So that moves us on then to the item being referred back to Cabinet, which is to reconsider introducing changes to the member-led ward grant system to utilise the underspend in February each year. So this represents the member grant scheme where each member has the ability to facilitate grants to local communities of £500, and what we're being asked here is to look at the underspend element of that at the end of effectively the year that is being respected there, to see if there's a way that underspend can be used. Joe, did you want to speak on this?
Yes, please, Chair. So minute number 200, as you said, about the future of community grants. I did attend the ONS meeting on the 17th of November, and they did vote to utilise the underspend in February each year. I think this would be incredibly difficult. Last year there was less than £2,000, I believe, underspend, and I hope we don't really come to that this year or the next. I think actually if there was an underspend, there would be a real scramble for members to have that could be difficult to adjudicate who actually gets the underspend. So I would like to make a proposal, please. The scheme runs to the 1st of March each year, and I would like any underspend assessed on the 1st of March or thereafter, and any underspend to be donated to the community lottery startup grant, which would help community groups start their ventures. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Joe. Do you have a seconder for that, Trudy?
Yes, I'd like to second that. I think that's a perfectly sensible idea to keep it within the communities. Thank you.
Okay, so that's a way in which the funding can then be allocated to local community groups, which is what that specifically is targeting, as I understand it, through the fund that's being created there. I guess just need to turn to you, Emma. Is that something we can pick up in this way?
Thank you, Chairman. I would just probably just refer back to Steve as Chair and ONS in case there's anything that he wanted to add, obviously as well from the conversation. And if that's what you've got, a proposer and a seconder, then you can take that forward. Obviously, have debate and then take that forward at this point. Okay,
thank you for that. And again, it was good to see all of the different ways in which the grant was used that's gone out in or been talked about in this month's Broadland news that's going through people's doors this week. So again, I would expect to see members have a flurry of requests for this year's money over the next month or two. Steve, there's a proposal to make use of the funding so the funding's not lost. It's slightly different to what you were proposing, but it seems to be a mechanism that would work every year as such, and also would be targeted to community groups, which seemed to be where it was the aspiration was to give it to. What do you feel on that?
Yes, well, I can see where you're coming from, Joe, in relation to that. So there's not an underspend, and that does make some sense, because as the current situation is it's just an underspend and it's not utilised, and I don't believe any of us want to see that in terms of communities. I would say, however, I think the two schemes are different, and when we looked at the various schemes under the original report from the officers. The community lottery was discussed separately, along with all the others as well. And I think that the issue here is that with the community lottery, it does rely upon, of course, people being focused around that and trying to raise funds via that mechanism, which is a different mechanism than the dedicated member ward scheme. And the member ward scheme, I think can be more targeted, especially where you've got just a few people who are really at it, and it can be more targeted in a better way, in a different way, not the same way, of course. So I think they're two very different schemes in that respect. So I know, obviously, it's been moved and seconded here, but I still feel that the ONS committee's point around this is a good one. It converges with the officer's point to keep it distinct within the members' ward scheme. And as we know, South Norfolk have two. So if they have an underspend on their ward scheme, it goes over to their community scheme, which is always oversubscribed. So you can see how the mechanism works there, but it's kept within grant schemes, direct grant schemes. And one thing about this, we all have our different policies. Some we consider in Broadland that perhaps a little bit better than South Norfolk, and South Norfolk perhaps a little bit better than Broadland sometimes. And I think that when we discussed this previously on ONS, the way that is prescribed, with it all being dedicated around member direct grant schemes, seems to make sense. So without, of course, a community grant scheme, which is 50,000 down there, this underspend mechanism for February seemed to make sense to us. And therefore, well, yes, the ONS position is what it is, Chair,
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. I would just like to highlight it's not a competition between ourselves and South Norfolk to who's got the best policies or not. As you know, we're all working together for the best of our residents, and that's our goal here. So thank you for your comments there, Steve. Lana, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to commend the portfolio holder for economic success. I mean, I think this is a fantastic compromise and a fantastic way of returning what effectively is public money back to the community in a way that is fair and keeps the money in Broadland. So I think it's a really good idea, and I think and I'm really grateful to you for putting it to Cabinet today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Lana. Yeah, that's a good point you make there. It is for local Broadland community groups to be able to access that particular fund. So I believe we probably need to go to a vote on this, James?
I think so, Chairman, yes.
So before we do that, are there any other questions or any other points?
Can I just, Chairman, just to
sorry, yeah.
confirm, obviously you requested that you can do this. Absolutely you can. I just thought I'd give you the assurance. I've just quickly found the bit in the Constitution. So you've had it referred back to the decision maker, and you can consider that decision, or you can have an alternative. And obviously this alternative will override the decision that you made in Cabinet last time round regarding that, just for clarity, Chairman.
Thank you for confirming that. That's appreciated. Okay, back to you then, James.
Right, Councillor Copplestone, are you for this?
For, thank you.
Councillor Emsall?
For.
Councillor Hempsall?
For.
Councillor Leggett?
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle?
For.
Councillor Vincent?
For.
And Councillor Wymark?
For.
Thank you, that's carried.
Okay, thank you for that, James. So that will be the process that we use moving forward in effectively from the end of this year's into next year's scheme. So thank you for that. That moves us on then to item 8 on the agenda, the budget update second wave COVID funding. I believe it's you leading on this one, isn't it, Debbie?
It is, Chair, I'm afraid, because Rodney's on leave. So, yes.
Okay, so over to you then.
Thank you. So what we'd like to present to you is a request for some additional funding that we will draw down if we need it. So this is sort of the worst case scenario, but obviously we've responded and continue to respond to the COVID pandemic. But on top of that, last Cabinet, we brought our revised delivery plan through, and so to enable us to continue to support our residents and businesses with COVID and to deliver on our delivery plan, we would ask for some additional funding for some additional resources. And in the main, these are very short-term resources, although a few of the posts in a few of the areas we would ask that we may need to have a slightly longer, up to about 18 months, because of the lag in times of the impact of COVID in terms of certain things around housing benefits and the housing service in particular. So the report in front of you has 4 recommendations, but I would like to go through the report, in particular table in 1.4, just to articulate exactly why we need some of those additional resources. And I know that my fellow directors as well would like to come in on their particular areas. So I think if I open up to Jamie in firstly, and then Phil, and then I will follow myself as to why we're asking for those particular resources and how we intend to utilise them if we need to.
Okay, thank you. So Jamie, you want to go first?
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. Looking at the table in paragraph 1.4, the first 3 items relate to my directorate around housing. So if I just tell you a bit about what that information pertains to. So it's been well rehearsed in formal and informal meetings, the additional demand that we're seeing through the housing team at present, and the challenge that the housing team are having in keeping up not just with the number of cases, the frequency of requests we're getting for support, but also the increasing complexity of some of those cases. And obviously that's driven by COVID as a primary stimulus, but it's actually more about the economic downturn that's happening consequentially and the hardship that people are experiencing. In order to keep up with the demand, we feel it's necessary to put in place some additional resource for an 18-month period. And obviously at the last cabinet, you considered and put through to council and duly signed off on the best in class housing programme. We see that housing programme as a route to delivering a greater level of efficiency and improved customer journey to our residents, so that in 18 months time, we're not in the position of needing any additional resource, less we're in a position to give over some of that efficiency back into the general reserves pot for your consideration as to how to deploy. So that's what those 2 housing solution officers are about. The next line is about surge capacity in the event that we see in the event that we have another lockdown, another surge in need in our community caused by the COVID pandemic. I draw upon Debbie's point earlier. This would only be absolutely in the worst case scenario, and if needed, councillors will be aware that we were very fortunate in the first lockdown and subsequently in the recent lockdown to be able to call upon a redeployed workforce. We used 5 and are still at present using 5 leisure staff from our leisure centres in South Norfolk, who've played such a fantastic and vital role in our COVID response to support the community. This is in the event that there needs to be an ongoing need to call upon those staff to continue to enhance our community hub offer. It's not something we foresee needing, certainly after the end of this week when those staff are put back into leisure centres. However, it's important that we have the ability to call upon that resource if there is a need, and colleagues will be aware of the the speed at which things develop in this COVID world. The third line is about community connectors. So we're aware, again, in South Norfolk, we've had a more developed model.
Sorry, Chairman, sorry to interrupt. I raised my hand earlier just because I was hoping that each officer would articulate against each line which posts or for how long. That's sorry, Chairman, that's the information I was kind of looking for as we go along. Is that okay?
Okay, so Jamie, around the 3 lines you've gone through for Lana, what sort of timeline are you looking at for those?
So absolutely fair question, Councillor Hempsall, thank you. The first line is for up to 18 months. I believe the budget is there for 6 months. And Debbie will cover off the latter request in terms of next year's budget. The 5 FTEs, if we needed them in terms of community hub capacity, would be only for a 6-month period, and as I said, only if required. The third line is for 2 FTE community connectors. As I was then going on to say, we've had a more developed community connector model in South Norfolk, which has paid huge dividends in terms of the COVID response. We've also seen an absolutely fantastic upsurge in mutual aid groups and general community support throughout the pandemic, which the communities team are working hard to embed and develop into our kind of business as usual models. I think the 2 FTE community connectors would play a significant role in terms of picking up some of that low level need that we see out in the community and act actually as a first point of resistance in demand management through to our housing team by being able to pick up kind of lower level debt concerns, hardship issues and general levels of anxiety before those issues manifest themselves as crisis and present to the council and its officers as statutory concerns, which inevitably are worse for the resident, but also more expensive for the council to manage as well. We'd see those roles being in situ for 18 months, after which point we'd be looking to encourage partnership investment in our community connector endeavours, looking to step back as a council, but continue to see that resource in the community through partners' investment and budgets. I'll hand back over because I think the next line is the next line is waste, but only pertinent to South Norfolk. The next 2 lines, in fact, are only pertinent to South Norfolk. The next line pertinent to this conversation is with HR. So I'll hand back over to Debbie.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.
Before we do that, do we want to just pick up any questions that we have for Jamie on the lines that he's presented to us?
Yes, sorry, forgive me, Chair.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's just obviously trying to find the best way to work our way through this. That's all, Jamie. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. The community connectors to support our communities, is this just through COVID, Jamie, or would you, I mean, it does say that there is a need to employ them for an 18-month fixed term, which would probably take us through COVID, hopefully, but isn't this more business as usual? How would you position that? Thank you.
Great question. I would position it that a lot of the response in terms of what is effectively Mike Pursehouse's set of services, housing and hardship, we are dealing with COVID, but we're dealing really with the economic downturn as a consequence of COVID, which is, as you will know, and other colleagues will know, is not a short-term endeavour. I don't think, looking at all the models that we have available to us, and incidents like, we know that the furlough scheme will end in the spring, which will create another upsurge in terms of people needing support with benefits and housing. I don't think we expect the demand to dissipate anytime soon. So 18 months feels like a good point, a point of time of which we feel we'd be able to get on top of the issue with our communities and work through. So I don't know if that answers your question, Councillor Coppleston, but I think it's caused by COVID, but the actual issue we're trying to face here is about the economic downturn and hardship of our residents.
Okay, thank you for that, Jay. So how do these roles differ from the community officers that we've got sorry, I'm not quite sure of their job title, but for the likes of I'm trying to think of the officer's name.
Dan Goodwin, Chairman, or Julie Ringer?
Richard Squires would be one.
Mike, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Chairman. So in terms of community connectors, really kind of grassroots community support, we would be looking at these two members of staff to really, this is about navigation, and it's about individuals not understanding where to go and where to go for support. So it's really light touch, looking at, we know that a lot of people who come into the system, and particularly now we're going to see more people come in who aren't used to the kind of public sector. So how can we navigate those individuals around, and then to get them into the right place and the right services that would be. That's where I see a community connector. Communities officers are more about capacity building and about building the kind of infrastructure around the council and community.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Fran, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah. I mean, obviously with the community connectors, I'm guessing like in a, well, short and long term, really, you look at them sort of reducing pressure on housing, well, and other areas as well. And also you spoke about partner investment, Jamie. Can you explain how that's worked in South Norfolk? Because I know obviously you've got some partner investment down there.
I can, Councillor Wylmot, thank you. So in South Norfolk, we, and it was before my time, so I take no credit for this. It was on Mike's watch. However, in South Norfolk, they took an earlier decision to invest in community connectors, maybe 4 or so years ago. As a consequence, and as budget has become available through things like the NHS primary care networks, and social prescribing has become much more of a thing in the public sector recently, we've been able to shift the emphasis on some of those partners supporting these sorts of roles, to the point where now Mike has a small army, in fact, of community connectors that are funded specifically for the South Norfolk area, but they play such a huge and vital role in terms of the ability to manage hardship and community level issues in that arena. In Broadland, we haven't got the same foothold, as it were. And we've got, obviously, because of the COVID situation, economic downturn, such an immense amount of pressure around some of our statutory services at this time. Now feels like a good time to be trying to find those community level routes to alleviate those issues, but we'd absolutely be looking for partner agencies to continue to invest in that model in the way that we've seen in South Norfolk.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Jamie. It sounds like within this that there's a lot more to these things than just 1 or 2 lines on this table. Just not quite sure how we're going to get from where we are now to what sounds like a redesign of service. And if it is that, then this seems beyond what we're asking for tonight. Sorry, Trevor, you got your hand up?
Yeah, Chairman, thank you. It's not a redesign of services, it's a service fit for the circumstances in which we find ourselves. So as Jamie said, the economic tail and downturn of COVID, and we're very lucky in Broadland and in South Norfolk in that we're in 2 of the districts in the top 5 that should bounce back according to a Grant Thornton review. So we've got to, or we should, seek to maximise that opportunity. And the report that you've got in front of you and the posts that are in there are designed to ensure that we can deliver the business plan that's been put forward, as well as provide support to those areas of the community, those people who are going to be hardest hit with that long tail of economic downturn, and also make sure that we're doing everything we can to stimulate the economy going forward, to really take advantage of the position that we're deemed to have, and the ability to bounce back, but that will require resource to do that. So this is not really a repurposing of the business plan. This is to make sure that we can respond to the circumstances in which we find ourselves, and is intended to be a budget provision which is drawn on if needed. So for example, we anticipate there's going to be every possibility of a significant upturn in infection rates post the Christmas unlock, and we need to make sure we've got the right provisions in place to be able to respond to that and the impacts on the economy. So I'll just be very clear with members, this is not a redesign of service. This is a response to COVID, or giving us the provision or the ability to respond as needed. Clearly, budgets would only be used and drawn down if they were absolutely required by the circumstances.
Okay, thank you for that, Trevor. So from again, just to clarify for me where we are with these different bits, we have a mechanism at the moment in place where resource can be brought into place and signed off on a monthly basis with the finance AD and the portfolio holder for finance. Why aren't these things being dealt with through that and being funded through the COVID funding rather than restructuring the Broadland budget? Sorry, I'm just a bit lost, that's all. Chairman,
if I could respond to that. So indeed, you'll note that at the front end of the report, a significant amount of the ask is to be funded through the available COVID funding. I asked as the managing director of the team to say, actually, where are the pinch points? What do we need? Take a look forward rather than the immediacy of where you find yourselves, so that we can paint a more comprehensive picture to the councillors to say, actually, this is what we see the potential model looking like, to make sure that we're match fit and able to respond to the circumstances. This is what we think we need, rather than that more immediate response of, for example, if there was a spike in January and we said, oh, crikey, we need another 10 COVID support wardens, then I would absolutely use the mechanism you described. This was intended to get ahead of that curve and give you a more comprehensive picture of where we thought we were and what we thought.
Okay, thank you for that, Trevor. I think I'm still struggling with this because I'm seeing this as a change in our delivery, because we're putting into budgets, and while I appreciate what you've just said as far as where this sits, we as members haven't been on that journey, as in we don't quite understand where these different resources fit in for different ways or different reasons. And I think that's something we need to have, because there's quite a lot of resource being asked for here, and we're not au fait on where that sits. I think this needs more work, although I'm probably getting ahead of myself now because I've not heard all of the different bits. Again, perhaps if I could ask Trudy, I mean, the portfolio holder, if there's anything she wants to add at this point around this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd made the note that actually, although it's headed up in the recommendations as a COVID response, the short breakdowns we've got does make it look very much like a BAU, and it did look like a restructuring almost of departments. As Jamie is going through and making it more clear, it does make you understand more what each item is for. And yeah, I didn't feel like there's enough of an explanation on here. And I must admit, initially, when the report came to me, or Rodney mentioned to me, I'm going to ask for X amount of money, I did say, well, that's fine, but I'm going to need to know what it's for. And I don't know if it fully explains what it's for. And so I think through the discussions, yeah, we're sort of not quite sure, because it's like if you say you think it will be, say, 6 months, but it may need to continue for 18 months. I'm just wondering if that will then be embedded once those officers are on the payroll, they're on the payroll, and that's it. And we've got extra officers over and above what we originally thought we were having. And we then find that impacts on our savings through collaboration and has a knock-on effect on that. So, yeah, I just feel like there's not enough explanation, and I appreciate all the senior officers here this evening now going through to explain it, but actually it would have been better probably if it was in the paper. So that's just how I feel.
Okay, thank you for that, Trudy. Yeah, I think that's that element of where it would have helped if we'd had a wider briefing on this, or just some better understanding of what it is we're trying to achieve, because it just doesn't feel like we know enough about it to sign it off. And I guess that's where I am with it. And I'm not sure going through it line by line tonight is going to resolve that, because yeah, if I go back to the lines that we have heard from Jamie, we may or may not need this, and it's was one of the phrases that was used. So it's one of those things. It almost feels like the cart before the horse, is, and we haven't identified what the resourcing requirement specifically is. It's we might need it, and if we might need it, then this might be what it costs. Is sort of what I'm feeling about this. So I think this whole section needs much more understanding to take the members on the journey with it. Trevor, can you help me here?
Chairman, yeah, thank you. I mean, you'll appreciate that the reporting cycle can be up to 12 weeks. So actually we won't be able to respond in that period of time. So this was an attempt to get ahead of any future requirement going forward. And I think there is a line by line for each of the asks, but would it be useful for members to suspend this report this evening? Emma, looking to you on the right way to do that, and bring it back for further consideration in January, because we can always use emergency provision if we require to use emergency provision.
I think that would be helpful. It's whether is there an element of this that has an urgency that we need to do it tonight, and because there's some of these are actually using COVID funding. So I'm just sorry, I just flicked to the recommendations. So recommendation 1 and 2 seems specifically around the government funding. Can we deal with those and then come back to the other two, or would that not be appropriate?
Chairman, I'd be grateful if you could deal with those. They certainly are drawing down the government's COVID grant. So I would really be grateful if you were able to agree those. And then perhaps we can bring back items 3 for further consideration. And item 4, if you're unable to take that this evening, then we'd look to bring that back in due course. But certainly if you were able to agree 1 and 2, that would be very helpful.
Okay, so thank you for that. On that guidance, I think we perhaps should progress that way. So Trudy, if I hand back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, so I'm quite happy to recommend 1 and 2 to the council. 3 we've already discussed, and I just wanted to make one small point about item 4. It is the intention, and has been the intention, to have the ability to have hybrid meetings. So I completely appreciate the need to improve technology in the council chamber. However, I do think we need to know what it is we need. So I would have thought, and I don't know how quick can be done, although I wouldn't have thought it's a major piece of work. I would have thought if we can have either a business case or the wish list and why the wish list is there. So if that comes back in that way, so we know and we've got an idea rather than guessing how much is going to be required. But that doesn't take away from the ambition to have the ability to have hybrid meetings.
Thank you for that, Trevor. You got your hand up?
Chairman, if I could just respond to that. Absolutely happy to do that, Trudy. I would just challenge you on one point. The guessing is not quite fair because we have had a survey of one of the council members to say that actually the ballpark figure to do this work looks like this. So it is an informed ask, albeit that it's not backed up by the business case that would be developed in due course. So happy to bring that back with the full business case.
That's great. Yeah, because we haven't seen that, so we didn't know where obviously the 50,000 has come from. So if I can propose 1 and 2 and then request 3 and 4 to come back in January, that's what I'd like to put forward, please.
Okay, thank you for that, Trudy. So if I second those from the chair so that we can move things forward. Is there any other comments or anything that anyone wants to say at this point? Steve, sorry, Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, just excuse me, just on the same point, Trudy, that Trudy's picking up, because I know Trudy was at ONS as well, and ONS was picking up on the same point that Trudy made actually around, what's the business case, and I know when we was, scrutinising this, the question about the 50,000. You must know what that is actually adding up to, what the technology is, and the response was, well, this is what we believe from a sort of look-see on it, but it's something that's got to be fleshed out with further work to it and then come back. So that actually converges along the same path that officers responded to, and I believe Debbie responded to at ONS. That it still needs further work to come back on. So it's quite interesting. We sort of came to the same sort of conclusions as that on that. On the A and B, on the amendments on the 50,000, also there was an issue around the governance on it as well. As we know, the government's position at the moment in terms of enabling meetings to take place via Zoom, etc., and attendance and all the rest of it. Also, he was asking questions around the governance moving forward. So, for instance, would there be a situation in the future where COVID's over and we were still allowing members to attend via Zoom for other reasons? Where are we going with that? Is that the intention or isn't that the intention? So we wanted to see a review of governance on that to come back as well. Also, there was also a reference in there as well that if you did go ahead with this IT update for the chamber, then this would mean that other projects may be delayed, IT projects. So thinking about that and thinking about some of those IT projects, 365, the officers rollout, the members' IT current review going on, it seemed to us that without real cast iron understanding around this, that really, if that was to go ahead, these other projects should not be delayed as a result, because they are important projects and they've already been agreed and specified. To hold those up because of this would seem to be not correct. So those two amendments there, A and B, are very much in line with what Trudy's just said as well, Chair.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, Steve, on where the ONS position was that and how that links back to where we are at this point in time with what we're taking forward then. So the recommendations before us are 1 and 2, with recommendation 3 and 4 to come back at a later point. Trudy was suggesting January, and I would suspect they will come back as quickly as they can, but January would be ideal if that's possible. But again, that would depend on officer time to pull those things together. So James, over to you for the vote.
Chairman, I think Emma wanted to speak for you.
Emma,
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is to do with the virtual meetings, is it?
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
going to just add a bit of context behind Steve's comments, just so that everybody's kind of aware of where we are with those. So the legislation that we've got in place at the moment under the Act is in place until the 7th of May. There is ongoing conversation around how we continue that in some way, shape or form, because I think every council, and we've seen as well, attendance at meetings is better, and we're reaching much more of the public. I mean, it's much more open and transparent. So we are hopeful that this will continue in this way, some way, shape or form. But that just to remind councillors that the way we operate at the moment, we legally can do so till the beginning of May. But we're hopeful that that will be reassessed. And then on Steve's other point about the council chamber, obviously you're aware we've got massive IT projects. We've talked about those in quite some detail in the past. They're obviously ongoing and would not be put at jeopardy by doing the council chamber. I can assure you, we know exactly what we need to take through as a priority. This is an internal project that's on the list for being resourced when and if we need to take that through, so it won't be at the detriment of another project.
Okay, thank you, Emma, for confirming those two things. So back to you, James, for the vote.
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Copplestone, are you for the proposal?
4, please. Thank you.
Councillor Emsall.
4.
Councillor Hempsall.
4, and can I just add that I wholeheartedly support the hybrid meetings. The audience that we reach is just incredible, and it can't be, you know, it's just so good. So yeah, thank you.
Councillor Leggett.
4.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
4.
Councillor Vincent.
4.
And Councillor Wymark.
4.
So that's carried.
Thank you for that, James.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 are deferred.
Indeed. Yep. Thank you. Okay, so that moves us on then to item 9, which is the business rate pooling. I suspect this is with you again, Debbie. So perhaps if you could introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. As in previous years, this is around the proposal to pool our business rates with the other Norfolk districts and county, and could potentially generate just under £4 million, 3.87 odd million. However, there are more risks than in previous years, namely the risk still stands around the NHS Trust, and that's now been granted, they've been granted leave to appeal, so we don't have clarity yet on whether that is still a potential, you know, that's still a potential risk. We don't have clarity yet around whether they will be deemed as being charitable, have granted charitable status and therefore entitled to 80% mandatory relief. However, there is an additional risk this time, which is around whether, because of the impact of COVID on high streets, whether that means that it might tip any of the districts into a safety net position. So in paragraph 3.4, it explains that, but if you go up to the table on 2.1, you can see that particularly Norwich and Great Yarmouth wouldn't take much to move them into the safety net position. If that happened, then because we're in a pooling arrangement, unless the whole pool tipped into a safety net position, at which point the government funding would come back in, then the rest of the pool members have to support that pool. However, if we pull out now, we will cause the whole pool to fall, and there is an opportunity once we've received our proposed settlement figures in December for each council then to look at their position again and have 28 days in which to say whether they want to withdraw from the pool. But once one pool's out of the pool, the whole pool falls. That's how it works. And I know that Section 151 officers are looking at their current forecast and recalculating them again. So we should have, by the time we get our provisional settlements, both a reforecast for next year's business rates, and also we'll know our provisional settlements, so we'll know for clarity then exactly what our safety net levels are, etc., and our other funding. So the recommendation therefore in this report is is that it would be in conjunction with yourself and Councillor Mancini-Ball as the portfolio holder for finance and Rodney as the Section 151 Assistant Director of Finance, then to have a discussion when we've got that little bit more information around a provisional settlement and also those reforecasts to decide whether or not we withdraw from the pool.
Okay, thank you for that, Debbie. So if I summarise that just for clarity, we're talking about the business rate pooling for 21-22,
yes,
which effectively we are giving an in principle element to support at this point in time. We have an opportunity once we have the finance settlement known to us to then make a decision at that point in time based on most up-to-date information around where we sit with business rates. And the key thing here that this is asking for is to give that authority to myself as leader and Trudy as the portfolio holder to authorise whether Broadland stays in the pool or Broadland withdraws from the pool. And if Broadland withdraws from the pool, then the whole pool collapses. Is that correct?
that is correct. And obviously council will be making their decision. So it may be that, you know, if Norfolk, for instance, withdrew or one of the other districts, then the pool would collapse anyway.
Yeah, so if one party of any of the districts withdraws, then the whole pool collapses. Okay,
Yes.
sorry, I've probably just said all the things Trudy was going to say. Sorry, Trudy, over to you.
That's okay. No, what I was going to say, actually, this is the normal way we make the decision every year, actually, to go to the pool. But I appreciate Debbie bringing the paper forward, because actually we haven't ordinarily done that. This now reaches a wider member audience to understand exactly how the business rate pool works. So I appreciate that. And I would think it's entirely sensible at the moment to continue to show our interest in being in the pool. As Debbie has explained, there are advantages to it, and Rodney will definitely assess the risk nearer the time once we know our settlement. So I've got no issues in recommending items 7.1 and 7.2 on page 41 to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Trudy. I'll second those. Again, yeah, the similar way that the support is there, that this has done some good work historically for Broadland in bringing additional funding both into Broadland and into the wider Norfolk area. And it's something we should look at the appropriate time, make the appropriate decision with the most up-to-date information we can. So I'm quite happy to second that. Is there any questions or anything from any of the other portfolio holders? No, can't see anything. So James, over to you for the vote.
Councillor Copplestone, are you for the proposal?
For, please.
Councillor Emsall,
For.
Councillor Hempsall,
For.
Councillor Leggett,
For.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle,
For.
Councillor Vincent,
For.
and Councillor Wymark.
For.
Thank you. That's carried.
Thank you, James. Okay, so that moves us on to item 10, being the earmark reserves on page 42. Who's presenting this one? Oh, sorry, I've got a hand up. Melanie, sorry.
Maddie.
So, Maddie,
Thank you.
over to you then, Maddie.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, all. So the earmarked reserves report is a revision of the report that we brought forward on the 3rd of November. So I was just wondering if nobody had any questions, whether you'd like me to go straight to the recommendations, Chair?
Well, I would guess that probably the portfolio holder will put forward the recommendations, so you probably don't need to cover those. Is there anything specific in the report we need to be made aware of?
I'll just run through a couple of the recommendations that were put forward in a bit more detail. So one of the ones that was put forward was to separate out the bridge maintenance reserve so that we could identify which monies we had in relation to Marriott's Way and the Bure Valley Railway. So that one is one of the recommendations. The other was the introduction of two new reserves. One was for the refuse services, which was 3 million to support the procurement project, which was going in relation to potentially the purchase of the new vehicles or the leasing of the new vehicles. And the other recommendation is for 1.86 million into the Food Innovation Centre, which again is another project which has just gone through the ERDF funding and currently at REBA stage 3. And we also had 2 additions to 2 existing reserves, one which was for IT, 1.3 million, which was to support any new IT software applications, which potentially we would be requiring over time. And then also there was 5 million to go into the Broadland Growth Reserve in support of the ambition to provide the new housing in the district via the Broadland Growth Initiative.
Okay, thank you for that. Trudy, did you want to add anything to those?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we did see this, as Maddie said, we saw this paper back in November. These are the items that we deferred at the time and asked to come back. So there's been a calculation done to separate the two lots of bridges, both the Marriotts Way and the Bure Valley Railway. So we've now separated that reserve as we requested. The IT reserve and the Broadland Growth Reserve, as Maddie said, are top-ups. We know we haven't got a project in mind at the moment for Broadland Growth, but we know how much we need to find a project. Apart from anything, we do need to get some more money into the council to cover our shortfall going forward. So we do need to start identifying projects. The IT reserve, we've always known we're going to need this. Software each year is going to have to be replaced or updated, whatever the word you use. I have asked last week at the member briefing, I did mention, and Debbie agreed to have an all-member briefing again about the IT, because actually this keeps coming back, and I think we forget that we have already agreed these sums of money anyway, so it's just putting them in a pot. And then finally, the other 2 reserves, the new refuse one, we know we're going to have something. It's out to procurement. We don't know what that something is yet, but it is prudent to put some money aside. And then finally, the Food Innovation Centre, I think the whole council is looking forward to that coming to fruition. And that will be Broadland's requirement. So I'm very happy to put forward recommendation 1, 2 and 3. And then also just a final confirmation that the Assistant Director of Economic Growth, in consultation with the portfolio holder for economic development, has the authority to agree additional economic growth projects to be funded from the existing Economic Success Fund reserve. So just repeat, it's options 1, 2 and 3 on page 47, and then that final confirmation that I've mentioned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Trudy. And again, I'll second those from the chair, as it is easy to do so. And it's good to see that we got confirmation on the governance question around the use of that specific fund. So that was good to have there. Picking up perhaps 2 of the bigger elements there, the Broadland Growth Reserve, it picks up there the need that we do realise within our district as far as having more homes, building those homes, and also the affordable homes that we so badly need. And also the really exciting project that we've got coming forward with the Food Innovation Centre, and again the way that will be at the cutting edge of delivery and enhancing the food elements of adding value for the Norfolk economy. So that's got to be a good element to be there. As you said, these aren't new numbers; these are numbers that we were aware of before. But it's just prudent to put the money to one side, ready to be able to use. So I'm quite happy to second those. Is there any questions from anybody? Lana?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say thank you for really neatly presented report. I often find, because of the formatting, I find tables quite tricky, but this one was just perfect. So I just wanted to thank officers for any and all efforts that went into making this document as accessible as possible. Thank you. Okay, well, I think, Maddie, if it was you, well done. If it wasn't you, please can you pass on those thanks to whoever did? That's obviously appreciated. Joe?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note that Overview and Scrutiny Committee suggested that the Economic Success Fund should run through any funding with the Economic Success Panel. That won't be really practically possible. Most grants are given to startup businesses and around the level of £750. They are often done on officers' discretion, and any bigger projects, as suggested in the suggestion that Cabinet confirm, is in consultation with the portfolio holder and the Economic Growth Assistant Director. And just to give you an idea of what these were in the last couple of years, I think there was a donation to the Tour of Britain and a donation for the anniversary of the Repton Festival in Aylsham. So it is a relatively small amount of money, and I don't think it's necessary that each and every one of these should go before Economic Success Panel. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, Joe. Steve, you got your hand up?
Yeah, yes, it's not obviously for the panel. The position from ONS wasn't really around the panel agreeing or disagreeing or anything like that. It was actually for member information. So you, Joe, yourself have just actually given us a couple of examples. So it's about, and this is what's happening on ONS as well, examples being given. So because we asked the question, well, this money, how is it spent? Who does it go to? You know, is it a good thing that's going on here? And then the examples are given. It's going, oh, wonderful, excellent. This is exactly what needs to be happening. So the thing is, it was about member information, feedback, not about, clearly, Joe, yourself, you make these decisions around with the officer involved. It wasn't about that. It's about once you've made your decisions, it's about feedback to the Economic Committee, so that there's, information about who's being supported. So that was about trying to, members to understand, oh, we are doing this work. Because we did have to ask questions to understand what was meant by that, you see. So we thought that was a good positive thing for information purposes for the panel, Joe, only information.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. So yeah, I guess going forward, that would be useful at some way, shape and form with all of these reserves to make sure that we highlight how they're used, the way in which they're used, and that there's regular feedback to all members that they can access relatively easily. We've heard earlier about all member briefings perhaps being one of the mechanisms to do that. There may be other mechanisms, so I think that's a good thing to do. So thank you for that, Steve. Okay, so we have the recommendations. James, over to you for the vote.
Yes, Chair. Councillor Copplestone, do you support the proposal?
4, please. Thank you.
Councillor Emsell.
4.
Councillor Hempsall.
4.
Councillor Leggett.
4.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
4.
Councillor Vincent.
4.
And Councillor Wymark.
4.
Thank you. That's supported unanimously and carried.
Okay, thank you for that, James. Okay, that brings us to the end of this evening's agenda. So thank you, everybody, for attending and participating. And remember